London Docklands, or the London Docks, is an area of East London along the waterfront of the River Thames that covers approximately 9 square miles of London. Developed over a period of about 2,000 years, the Docklands were, at the time of the Romans, obviously far from the height of their development, and far from being a unified area which could fall under the single name of the Docklands. However, the area was still used to import and export supplies in and out of the Roman colony, Londinium. After the fall of the Roman Empire, during the rise of Anglo-Saxon England, a period of about 600 years, the Docklands underwent little change, perhaps except for the worse. With the arrival of the Normans in 1066 AD, the area saw improvements in development to allow for naval accessibility and the growth of trade. By the late 16th century, under the reign of Elizabeth I, the British kingdom expanded and grew with the rise of exploration and colonization, bringing with it an explosion in sea trade. As a result, the Docklands were further developed as a port, allowing newly established trade companies to import and export goods in and out of London. As colonization expanded, so did the Docklands, undergoing extensive development over a period of 300 years with the addition of canals, quays, and both dry and wet docks. By the 1920s, when the British Empire was at its largest, the Docklands covered a vast area of East London, spanning over 9 square miles. Despite this, after undergoing severe damage by German bombing in World War II and with the rise of modern shipping vessels, the London Docklands underwent detrimental decline, becoming derelict, detached, and often impoverished neighborhoods, including abandoned areas of once bustling commercial land. By the 1970s, development and governmental agencies encouraged reinvestment into the neglected London Docklands, culminating under the leadership of London Docklands Development Corporation, the DDC, in the 1980s, producing social gatherings such as arenas, theaters, and religious buildings, as well as business and residential quarters. In the current age, one can witness the results of this 40-year period of redevelopment, and the Docklands now present themselves as an area open to the study of the history and results of extensive and cyclical urban development. London Docklands reached the height of their development in response to the colonial and global trade climaxing at the height of the British Empire in the 19th to early 20th centuries. Pictured here is both an image of England and the extent of global British Empire in 1921. Evidently then, the ports of England, including the London Docklands, which became one of the largest ports in the world at that time, received intense investment and development. Along with this included technological advancements, the byproduct of the Industrial Revolution of the mid to late 19th century, which allowed for not only larger docks and cargo holds, but a systematic transfer of goods from sea to land consisting of canals, waterlocks, bridges, cranes, and both dry and wet docks. Currently, the London Docklands no longer play the same role they once did in receiving global seaborne trade, and consequently their development is no longer correlated closely with global phenomenon. The area is now closely linked with the London government and other local governmental entities. This becomes especially prominent in the redevelopment of the area in the 1970s and 80s, and extending to present day, with the formation of the London Docklands Development Corporation, or the LDDC, in 1980, which promoted both public and private investment into the Docklands. Now the London Docklands exists as an area of London which provides a number of services, including business and industrial parks, residential districts, social land developments such as arenas, theaters, museums, and outdoor leisure parks, and even an airport. Today, the London Docklands comprise of over 9 square miles of East London. Pictured here is a map and site plan of the London Docklands created sometime in the mid-20th century after the explosion of development witnessed in the 18th and 20th centuries. The image displays the extensive area which composed the Docklands, as well as the large amount of space which was required to receive global trade reaching London at the height of the British Empire. Evidently, it can be identified here the piecemeal nature of the Docklands, as the entirety of it was developed over hundreds of years according to need, with no final design of the whole in mind during the centuries-long process. As trade grew and more ships needed entrance into London, so also grew the size and amount of Docklands assigned space. It also becomes quite clear how the docks themselves grew larger over time to accommodate more trade and vessels, as coincidentally in the plan, the older to newer docks move from left to right respectively. As previously mentioned, the area of the Docklands used for the import and export of goods could be traced to the Roman colonization of England from 50 to 400 AD. Roman trade goods, shipping vessels, warehouses, etc. have been discovered throughout the site, indicating the presence of trade, essentially on a global level considering the time period, to the beginnings of London as a city. After the fall of the Roman Empire and the medieval period which followed, the explosion in sea exploration during the 16th century led to a corollary explosion in trade. With this trade came the need to expand upon the space allocated to receiving imported goods, and it is during this time one sees the first large wet dock constructed in this area, the Howland Great Wet Dock. Throughout the 18th century, the London Docklands continued to grow with the establishment of trading companies such as the East India Trading Company, among others, leading to the addition of the West and East India Docks, the London Docks, and the Surrey Docks. Growth continued in the 19th century to the early 20th century with the addition of large cargo receiving and shipholding areas such as the Royal Docks and Tilbury Docks. A variety of factors led to the decline of the London Docklands as one of the largest global trading ports. As technology advanced, so too did the capabilities of naval engineers and builders to create larger ships capable of holding more cargo. The accommodation of these large cargo ships was a hard task, especially given the confines of the crowded space of London and the pre-established size of the River Thames, canals, bridges, shipholds, and the docks themselves. Economic factors such as the devaluation of the market as a whole, correlating with the American Great Depression, also possibly led to the decline of the London Docklands. Most prominently, the area undertook extensive damage during World War II as the German Luftwaffe targeted the area with aerial bombings, and after the war, the containerization of the shipping trade was unable to be accommodated by most of the docks. Coming out of this early to mid 20th century decline, the Docklands became a neglected and abandoned space, soon rife with poverty. By the late 1970s, throughout the 80s, the local and state governments pursued policies which promoted the reinvestment of this derelict area. Through the establishment of the LDDC, land was bought, sold, and redeveloped. Conflict, nonviolent in nature, did ensue, with many of the longtime residents of the London Docklands feeling taken advantage of, misplaced, and unconsidered. After a series of resolutions, the Docklands did undergo serious investment with developments such as Canary Wharf, a business district, residential districts, parks, arenas, and so on. One of the first docks built for the acceptance of global trade was the Howland Great Wet Dock, which is also one of the oldest surviving docks of the London Docklands, and was once a part of the Surrey Commercial Docks, and now exists as Greenland Dock. Located in Rotherhithe, a southeast London residential district, the Howland Great Wet Dock was built from 1695 to 1699. It took up approximately 10 acres, could hold 120 naval vessels, and its planning and construction was sponsored by the Russell family and designed by John Wells, a shipwright. The area was later expanded upon mostly in the 19th century with the addition of several other docks to accommodate growing trade, primarily focused on the trade of timber. By the early 20th century, the Surrey docks consisted of 9 docks in the canal, covering 460 acres. With the decline of the docks during and after World War II, the Surrey docks was one of the areas targeted by the LDDC for reinvestment and development. Now known as Surrey Quays, the area consists of a marina, over 5,500 residential spaces, industrial facilities, and outdoor parks. Upon its construction, the Howland Great Wet Dock consisted of a large water-filled rectangular space surrounded on its sides by spaces capable of docking ships. It was first built not for cargo, but for berthing and repairing ships, and so space which would accept cargo was not considered. The dock itself was located some distance from London proper and was directly off from the River Thames. The addition of the other docks, creating the Surrey docks, followed the same rectilinear pattern of the Howland Dock. However, the geometry of the whole can seem rather as an amalgamation of individual pieces made to fit together, as each addition was responding to a growing need to accept more cargo vessels. Many of the docks were connected via canal and water locks. Now, many of the docks are filled in and home to residential quarters, which follow the same rectilinear pattern previously set. The architecture itself is often repetitive and mass-produced, and similarities can be found in late Victorian and Georgian architectural projects. The West India Docks were the first commercial wet docks in London and were constructed in response to the growth of trade reaching London at the time of colonial expansion. Located in an area of East London known as the Isle of Dogs and established under the patronage of Robert Milligan and the West India Trading Company. 2 of the docks were designed by William Jessup, a civil engineer, and built from 1800 to 1802, and the third was built in the 1860s. The West India docks were constructed in response to the theft of cargo entering the Port of London and delays in cargo transfer due to built-up Dockland traffic. With the rise of container shipping, these docks, like many others, were unable to accommodate larger vessels and fell into neglect in the 1950s through to the 1980s. Through the LVDC, the area was redeveloped from the 1980s onward, containing a popular business park called Canary Wharf. Other infrastructure was added, including a new metropolitan railway system, which connected the once very separated area to the rest of London. The West India docks were arranged according to a rectilinear structure, with each dock adjacent to the other. They each extend across the peninsula of the Isle of Dogs, essentially making it an island, connecting to the bend of the River Thames through a series of waterlocks and basins. Altogether, they contained about 100 acres of water space, able to accommodate over 600 ships. The Canary Wharf development used the space surrounding the docks and extended over the water space as well, following the geometry previously set by the original West India docks. The development itself is rectilinear, with modern skyscrapers often having a rectangular footprint. Originally, the docks were organized to accommodate the relatively systematic and efficient importation of cargo, so each dock follows a linear pattern which allows for the ships to enter easily and transfer goods in an organized manner. Waterlocks and basins connected the docks, allowing ships to enter easily, safely, and with some form of organization. A series of warehouses were built along the docks to hold cargo. These were designed by George Gwilt and his son. The warehouses were large and rectilinear in order to efficiently use the condensed amount of space and keep the cargo secured. A large wall, 20 feet in height, was built around the entirety of the complex, also to prevent theft. Likewise, the Canary Wharf redevelopment also attempts to efficiently use the small amount of space through the rectilinear design in many-story buildings, which are often repetitive in nature. Developers also used a few open green spaces to create outdoor leisure parks and to break up the urban fabric with more natural environments. As global trade continued to grow with colonial expansion in the 19th century, so too did the need to further develop space for the acceptance of naval, cargo, and trade. The Royal Docks were built as an answer to this issue and are located in Newham Borough in East London, directly off the River Thames. 3 docks make up the whole, consisting of the Royal Victoria Dock, the Royal Albert Dock, and the Royal King George V Dock. By the early 20th century, these were all built to accommodate larger shipping vessels unable to reach upriver, and subsequently are quite large, with 250 acres of just water-filled areas and 12 miles of total docking space. With the decline of the areas due to container shipping, the docks became neglected and abandoned. During the redevelopment surge sponsored by the LTDC, reinvestment in the area ensued, and the docks now contain a variety of residential complexes, infrastructure such as modern roads, railways, and bridges, business districts, and the London City Airport. Similar to the preceding docks, the Royal Docks follow a rectilinear organization. The space which they hold is quite large when compared to the others, covering over 1,100 acres. Large industrial buildings, warehouses, and granaries were organized alongside the dock to support the trade and cargo which was received. These buildings also followed the rectangular pattern set by the docks themselves and were often multi-storied. The buildings constructed during the late 20th to 21st centuries follow a similar pattern of orthogonal organization. As previously mentioned, the docks are extensive, and so too is the space of which they hold. Warehouses and docks were built to accommodate a large amount of cargo importation and were organized for the quick and efficient delivery and exportation of goods. Currently, the Royal Docks maintain a reasonably impressive infrastructure and a large amount of housing, which accommodates over 10,000 residents. Here are key architectural terms and their corresponding definitions. Geography and bibliography images. The end.